Welcome back to Hardball. A California book publisher says most of the books geared to children have a liberal bias, and he's working to change that. Eric Jackson publishes books like Help Mom, There's a Liberal Under My Bed. He's now taking on global warming with The Sky's Not Falling. That's the name of a book for kids taking the conservative position. I think it's the conservative position. I'm not sure. It takes dead aim, of course, against Laurie David's upcoming book published by Scholastic Press, The Down-to-Earth Guide to Global Warming. Eric Jackson of World Ahead Publishing joins us this evening. Also with us is author Francis Moore Lappé, who takes issue with the types of books Mr. Jackson publishes. Let me go right now to Mr. Jackson. Why do kids, what age group are you pointing to here with this book?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on today, Chris. And the age group that we're looking for is actually the same as Scholastic. That's the 9 to 12 range. So we're actually looking to put out a book that is speaking to the exact same audience that Scholastic's upcoming book will be targeted at.
Well, let me just go through one of the subjects here. Help Mom, There's a Liberal Under My Bed. What's that story about? Put it in your own words. Do the storyboards if you can, verbally.
Sure, that's a fun little illustrated story that tells the story of a couple of boys that set up a lemonade stand, and there are liberals that show up that coincidentally look like Hillary Clinton.
Coincidentally, but you did it that on purpose, right?
Well, that was the author and the illustrator's work product, but yeah, it's certainly satirical. It's fun for adults to enjoy a chuckle at, and it has a story that's really about the American dream and about the free market.
What is it that kids should fear from the person you're describing as a liberal? It's obviously Hillary. What should they fear? What should a kid who's setting up an independent lemonade stand that doesn't have to pay taxes on it? Obviously, regular kids in the neighborhood, our kids have done it. What should they fear from a liberal? What's the message here?
Well, the message of that particular book was not so much fear. It does have a playful title, but really what it was trying to drive home is just how important the American dream is and how important the free market is and how if you work hard you can actually achieve great things. And
a liberal's going to come along and make you sell broccoli with your lemonade.
Well, let's hope not, but that was one of the amusing little stories that was in that book.
Let me ask you, let's bring in Francis. Francis, what do you make of this kind of publishing?
Well, there's nothing fun about it to me. It's pretty scary. We're violating Rule 1 of good parenting, which is do not frighten. And a title like that is very scary. Something under the bed is what kids fear. So it's just exactly the wrong approach in my view.
So if it was if this was a liberal reporter or liberal publisher that was putting out something like beware of whatever, of right-wingers or something, you would have the same attitude.
Absolutely. And Rule 2 of good child rearing, of responsible parenting, is don't create whole classes of people, groups of people who suddenly are the enemy. I mean, I thought conservatives believed in respecting the individuality and really celebrating that. And creating groups that are the enemy is the opposite of that.
You know, I got to ask you, do you have kids, Eric?
No, I do not, but one thing I was curious about, Chris, is whether or not Francis would agree that this book by Scholastic that they're putting out, which actually makes some pretty stark claims. It really, when you flip through it, indicates that polar bears are dying, that glaciers are melting, and that it really is directly responsible that people driving non-hybrid cars bear much of the blame. I mean, to me, that sounds like quite a major scare tactic. And frankly, the book that we're putting out, The Sky's Not Falling, which will also be available in September on the same date as Scholastic's book, is really meant to counter that, to counter this sense of fear, and to help children understand, hey, it's a complicated issue, but it's not necessarily something that you need to be worried about.
Well, Francis, what do you make of that? By the way, let me ask you this. Do you think kids of that age should be encouraged to have any public policy, Francis? Should they be encouraged to embrace the need for hybrid cars to cut down on CO2 emissions? Should they be encouraged to understand that there is, whether it's cyclical or it's seasonal or it's serial, the fact is glaciers are melting and what we should possibly be doing about it? Is that wrong to educate kids to that? It seems to me that kids at a fairly young age either become interested in public affairs or they don't. You don't say wait till you're 21 to start thinking.
Absolutely. And what we want to stimulate is kids' curiosity, their thinking, figuring out, being problem solvers. And what most excites me and what I think our primary responsibility is toward children, say, in grade school and on, is to enable them to act on that innate desire to be helpful, that innate desire to be a problem solver. And that's why I so appreciate the movement in schools called apprentice citizenship. And part of engaging with the world, yes, is learning about climate change and what we each can do. That doesn't have to be scary. That can be empowering.
Let me ask you about the liberal under your bed. Was that your idea, Eric? Did you come up with that title?
No, I did not. That was something that the author came up with, and we thought it was a very clever and well-executed book. But
What's it meant to be a kid's reaction? Say you're 8 years old, you're a girl, and you pick up a book, or your mommy gives it to you, or your teacher shows it to you, and it says under it, "Help, Mom," with exclamation points. Let's take a look at this. "Help!" exclamation point. "Mom!" exclamation point. "There are liberals under my bed." And there are people that look like, well, clearly one's Hillary Clinton, I think the other's Teddy Kennedy, and the other's a donkey, obviously a Democrat. Is this propaganda?
Well, I think it's good, clean fun, Chris, is what I would say.
But is it scary propaganda? I mean,
no, I don't think it's.
There are some right-wingers under my bed, and they showed a bunch of guys in military uniform with boots or whatever. Would that be propaganda? I mean, where do you draw the line as to what's just scaring the heck out of kids?
Well, I think that a little satire that actually appeals to adults gives them a good chuckle. Kids don't know who Hillary or Ted Kennedy is, thank goodness for that. I think there's nothing wrong with that. But let me ask you, what's scary? I think this scholastic
Let me tell you
book...
why. Let me tell you why. I do not want to take sides in this, but I'll tell you something. Frances made a point, and she must be some sort of psychologist, Frances, but when I was a kid, and I'd see like The Invisible Man with Claude Rains, I would go home every night after singing at the Midnight Spook Show with my dad at the drive-in. I would come home every night and check under my bed and feel around completely under the bed to make sure the Invisible Man wasn't under my bed. And I am fairly, well, I'm not going to say I'm totally normal, but I'm clearly not crazy.
I won't call you on that one, Chris.
But
let me tell you, since you seem to key into the
idea
title...
of saying, first of all, liberal is a word that used to mean for freedom, for tolerance, for maybe social change. And here it's clearly a word that's meant to scare people.
Well, I guess it used to mean that, but in the present day, maybe it means something different. But let me just say this, Chris. Let me tell you where the title came from, since it seems to be an issue for you. No, the title actually came from the author. She said she was describing why she wanted to vote for George Bush over Al Gore, and described what a liberal was. And apparently her child, whom she was describing this to, hopped off the bed and looked under it to see if there was a liberal down there. So it actually was a funny little incident from the author's past.
Frances, what do you make of that? Does that justify the title, Frances, the fact that the kid demonstrated the title ahead of time?
Absolutely not. It is frightening, as you say. I was that kind of kid myself, and I think many are.
I'm
so
sorry,
you
Frances,
are
I hear the term
pushing
frightening.
Fear.
I hear the term frightening and fear quite a lot, but I haven't heard you weigh in on what you think about Scholastic's book. Here, let me just hold it up again. And this book actually is quite scary, if you ask me. I flipped through it. It talks about 2/3 of all species disappearing, and actually it says very clearly, very plainly, that carbon in the atmosphere is the cause for this. It tells kids, hey, you need to go get a hybrid car. Well, some parents don't have as much money as Al Gore to afford to go out and get a $30,000 car.
Let me tell you what scares me, Eric, and what scares me is when I watch Jay Leno on Jaywalking on the Tonight Show, and he interviews people, grown-up people in their 20s and 30s, who don't know anything about their country. And then he says, what do you do for a living? And one of them says, I'm a teacher. That's what scares me. Anyway, thank you, Eric Jackson. Thank you, Frances Moore Lappe.